Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Mr.A, and while we would normally be doing the second part of the Project Suaveness animation set, there was a small problem with the recording I had actually done for the second video, namely that I accidentally deleted it in program-related error with the Aurelius action program I've been using for this. As it turns out, there's actually an option right beside the delete selected files that is delete all files. Guess which one I pressed by accident, and okay without really noticing. So suffice to say, my build-up video for the rest of the following get hits is non-existent at this point. I couldn't actually recover it in any fashion. As you can see briefly, kind of gone through those, just touching up a last bit of one of the falling frames right now, just putting the head back in place. Although I haven't put them all in Fighter Factory as of this particular recording, the new images and the rest of the following stuff is in Fighter Factory, and thus in the SFF in this case. So, yeah, the whole second part of the plan kind of went to hell. So in lieu of that, we're going to Plan B. Since I don't have any real footage for Project Suaveness right now, the Plan B is to effectively, let's take a look at one of my other projects, in this case, Project 10s, aka a certain legendary Super Saiyan. Just to get the obligatory question out of the way, no, this particular project is in no way related to the whole Z2 project thing, and is actually my own personal attempt to kind of use an example to work out how CPS3 based shading is supposed to look like for my own personal study, which I upload back on the Angel We Trust site, as well as the fact that I had previously worked on some Broly related stuff back in the old NES based DBZ related stuff for certain mutant characters, and the fact that I just really like the character for some strange reason, I don't know why. So there we go, enough reason. I had accidentally misplaced this particular animation in the past, which as you can probably guess from what I've described in other cases, I tend to do that a lot with some of my older work files. And based on the black outlines I have underneath that second frame, which is the one I'm primarily tweaking for this video set, this was back in the day when I still did things via just drawing really loose outlines, which I would later then fill in and finish up, as opposed to what I've done in more recent times, which is basically, instead of doing outlines, just blocking in the general figure, as it's a little more visible in these later frames. And from the blocked in space, I then refine everything down into its final shape. Of course, the problem with the original outlines is that if you're not careful, you accidentally kind of screwed the pooch on the proportions. It would carry over throughout the rest of the animation, and of course, when trying to fill in things later, if you aren't working on it immediately, which is exactly what happened here, you kind of forget what was supposed to be what. But slowly and surely here, I'm filling in the rest of the frame in order to get everything back to something a bit more reasonable. I managed to work out the back leg there. The front arm was previously just a really messy and non-existent thing. It's still missing the hand at this point, but it's much more complete, and I'll be drawing the hand on a higher layer anyway, so I can avoid overlap issues on the stomach and bit of the pink tunic thing. The pink tunic itself has actually been drawn in at this point, which was basically completely blank except for the line work implying that it was there beforehand. And as I'm going along, and what I'm doing right now, in fact, I'm adding the detail to the feet and just fixing some general placement and size issues. One of the other reasons why Broly makes a particularly interesting project is it's generally out of the norm what I normally do, which is figures that are closer to a more realistic size. Well, as realistic as any of these odd figures can get, anyway. As in the case, Broly's just really goddamn huge. He's noticeably bigger than anything there. At least a good size bigger than anything Capcom had really put out. Even if you look at examples like Juggernaut, while Juggernaut is physically very wide, he isn't quite as tall, and he's generally even more, he's got a more exaggerated figure anyway, so it kind of screws the pooch there. But probably the nearest comparable thing to Broly here is maybe Hugo, which you really only saw in the Third Strike series. Well, not in the Street Fighter 3 series as a whole, outside from his more recent appearances in something like Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Of course, in hindsight, Capcom has done some larger figures before. You can count kind of Zangief as well as kind of a big man, Birdie to some extent, although not as big as Zangief. But in terms of something that is clearly gigantic, this is probably bigger than Andre the Giant, which Hugo himself is based on, there isn't that much to compare to. Unless you maybe go into the Versus series with something like Onslaught. Even then, you can count the number of examples on one hand, and you don't need all your fingers for that. While I'm here, I might as well point out a few things which I particularly took advantage of when I was working on the general palette for this character. Is that first of all, I was borrowing a number of GIFs from Zweifel's website in order to get some sample colors to work with. So in the case of the white pants, I believe I took that from Rue's general color set. I'm pretty sure for the pink tunic, that borrowed from Oro's set. I think I got skin tone from maybe Ken at some point, along with a few of the gold tones. Might have messed around with a few different samples there. And also to cover another misconception which frequently comes up, the undertone, for lack of a better term, isn't always purple. I know I see a lot of CPS3 base stuff which seems to really just enjoy using kind of purple blue tones. At least as far as I could tell, the general idea is that the lower tone, which is in Shadow, is really, most of the time at least, unless it's kind of a weird palette, it's generally just a cooler version of what's up top. Now, in a lot of cases, that just happens to have a purple tone, but it doesn't mean exclusively it has to be something that's either purplish or blue. In the case of the pants, yes, from the sample I got, yes, it was somewhat more bluish, or at least had a kind of a bluish tone, but in another case, it could easily just be kind of a red, or just maybe even a darker version of what's there below. In the terms of the skin tones, I'm pretty sure that is, when a Ken's toned, it's actually a little more pinkish, or at least I would have tweaked it to make it that way, just to kind of fit in with the general kind of weird skin tone that's usually associated with Brawly at this point. But for the most part, once again, just because it's the undertone doesn't mean it needs to be blue or purple. It can be other tones as well. It's just those are the samples that seem to come up a decent amount of time. Your best bet is to go to Zweifel's website in order to take a look at the actual animation frames themselves and grab some color samples from there. I know there's a certain kind of a palette guide that is out there that a lot of people seem to refer to, but you're probably better off referring to something from the actual sprites themselves rather than just the palette guide, which, at least from what I personally found, has a few issues. Alright, at this point in the video, we're pretty much in the home stretch. I've fixed up the tuning at this point. It's fairly acceptable. It might be a few tweaks to do off camera, I know, and it actually got brought up later on. The back shoulder, or the front shoulder on Brawly is actually a little small for his size. Plus it was a little high. I actually adjusted that off camera, but now I'm drawing in the missing hand on a separate layer just to keep it from accidentally messing up what's there below. Admittedly, this one, it's always kind of fun drawing the hands. In Brawly's case, I was able to get a little bit of a conceit since I actually drew it a bit larger than what it would normally be in his case. And of course, having the extra space to work with does give you a little room for error, since you're able to, just as long as it doesn't look really off, you can get away with cheating on the hand a bit. Whereas if it was a smaller thing, you realistically have less room for error, since if something looks off, it'll really look off. So once this point, I've just finished kind of putting in the hand there. Mostly happy with what I got. I have to go back and realize at that point of the video or the recording, yeah, I forgot to finish his front boot there. Admittedly, the gold tones, they're fairly similar. I think I maybe use 5 general tones overall. Just got to fix the shape of the bottom part of the foot there, as well as I believe just fix the heel a bit. For the most part, the shading of the gold on this figure is actually fairly simple. It's no more difficult than it would be under CBS2 settings with the amount of colors used, to be honest. And yeah, pretty much this particular frame is done, and that's the end of this particular recording. Next time, I hope to get back to the regular Project Swampness stuff. If you happen to enjoy looking at me working on Brawly stuff, feel free to drop a message, and maybe I'll get around to doing some more in the future. Alright, catch you all later.